Welcome to the Weekly Bark, where ordinary people are talking about extraordinary things. Sit back and enjoy the ride. The Weekly Bark.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Bark. My name is Jesse, and I'm your host. This week, I want to talk about seizing an opportunity. I've been, fortunately, lately, I've been getting exposed to a lot of people who have been given opportunities to do something in life, and they had everything lined up for them, and they were able to do it. One of the things is I love baseball. I always have, I always will, and when I was a kid, that was like the first sport that I ever really kind of gravitated towards. I played it pretty well. I played other sports, but I mean, nothing, felt as good as playing baseball. And I still can remember to this day, the very first baseball game I'd ever went to. It was an Angels game at the Big A in Anaheim. I went with my father. He'd gotten tickets with a friend of his, like a neighbor of ours, and they were going to the game. And I could go if I could raise the money to get my own ticket. And so I had to go to the neighbors and collect glass bottles that I could go recycle to get the $3 or whatever it was general admission ticket to go watch the game. And so we did, and I went, and I was hooked. I mean, I love the feel of the brick dirt and leather in my hands. I love the sound the ball makes as it explodes off the bat, but mostly I love the game itself with all of its nuances and idiosyncrasies. And for a while there, I had the privilege of even coaching baseball. And baseball is a game of opportunities. For most people, they look at it as kind of a boring game. Like it's long. It's not what they're used to seeing. They want something that's a lot more engaging or energetic or offensive. What I like about baseball is it's about exploiting the opportunity. It's about seeing the right pitch and hitting it. It's about knowing when to steal and when to stay. It's about knowing what pitch to throw to the batter to keep them off balance. And it's about seizing that opportunity in a way that's really sort of interesting. Anywho, so as the other day, one of my best friends, he called me up and he asked me if I wanted to go to opening day at Anaheim Stadium, and I said absolutely. So we got there early. We just wanted to see all the opening day ceremonies, and it was beautiful. They had the big flag draped out on the field as we did the national anthem. They had a C-130 fly overhead, and they honored vets, and it was just a beautiful day at the Big A. And it's funny, since COVID, it seemed like for an opening day game, the place was darn near sold out. I had never seen that much red in Anaheim ever, and we were playing the Houston Astros, and it was beautiful. And I was listening to a guy, what's his name, Mark Maron. He has a podcast called the WTF Podcast, and he said, I don't know if we're post-COVID or we're at F-COVID, but I think we're at F-COVID. And so I think he's absolutely right, because looking at that game, man, there were just a ton of people out there that were ready to go have an awesome time and be around people again and to get back into a normal life. And as we were sitting there watching the game, we were about 10 rows back. My buddy got really good tickets. So we were on the third base dugout, right back about 10 rows. And we were sitting there, and there's this guy who was slightly older than myself and his wife sitting next to me, and we got to talking, and you could tell this guy, he had that charisma that you genuinely liked this guy. He talked a lot. He told great stories. He was engaging to listen to, but he wasn't condescending. He wasn't a prick. He was just a nice person. And even though he was an A's fan, he was wearing an A's jersey, I could get past that because my mother-in-law's grandma was a diehard A's fan. And of course we didn't both agreed that we hate the Giants, and so we were able to kind of bond over that. But he was telling me, and he was talking about all the pro players he had met, and he had pictures, and he was talking about this guy and that guy, and then he would back it up with photos, here's me and so and all this stuff. And he wasn't saying it in a braggadocious way. He was just saying it as like, this is my life kind of way. And And so that made me ask, because he only introduced himself as Joe, and I asked him. I said, "Well, were you a pro player at one time, or what is it? How do you know all these all these people?" And he's like, I own a mattress company, but no, I play in this fantasy baseball league where every year we go to like fantasy baseball camp and we train, and then we culminates with a game where we play against pros, former and current, and it's like, for guys who are baseball fans, this must be like the greatest thing ever if you can get down and doing that. And however, being the new blogger, podcaster, and amateur journalist I tuned into the mattress company bit. And I remember listening to Mike Rowe, who did a TED Talk years ago, and he's mentioned this story in his own podcast about how there was this guy who he had met in Vegas, who's a pig farmer, and he realized he figured out that he could take the scraps of food that the casinos were throwing away and use that as pig feed to feed his pigs cheaply, and he turned that into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And in Rowe's premise was this guy wasn't a kid growing up and saying, I'm going to be a pig farmer when I grow up. He just saw an opportunity and he was able to seize upon it. And so in doing my best Mike Rowe impersonation, I asked Joe, I said, well, how is it that you got into the mattress business? I can't imagine as a kid you said to yourself that one day you would grow up to be the mattress king. And he laughed and he said, no. And he told me about how he had done a variety of sales jobs and ended up working for this mattress company. And then for whatever reason, the company was either folding or he was getting laid off or they were downsizing or whatever. And they called him in and said, hey, look, we're going to lay you off, but we want to make sure that we take care of you. And so we're going to give you a $50,000 severance check. And we just asked that you sign a non-compete clause and all this sort of stuff. And anyway, he took his $50,000 severance check, and then he started his own business called Nest Mattress and Bedding. And so, like the pig farmer Mike Rowe talked about, this guy, Joe Alexander of Nest Mattresses and Bedding, and countless other people's, just like him, were able to see an opportunity and to turn it into something lucrative. Sometimes in life, we need to make chicken salad out of chicken crap. And I was reading a book called The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And in that book, he was kind of talked about that equation. He says, Gladwell says in his book, it's not the brightest who succeed, nor is success simply the sum of the decisions and efforts we make on our own behalf. It is rather a gift. Outliers are those that have been given opportunities and have had the strength and presence of mind to seize them. And he talks about in his book that there's no substitution for hard work and dedication. In fact, he postulates that in order to become an expert in any given field, it takes 10,000 hours of doing that thing to become an expert. And there's no shortcut to this. So whether you want to be a professional athlete, whether you want to be, the best computer programmer, if you want to be a musician and a songwriter, there is no shortcut to the 10,000 hour rule. And in his book, he rips apart like Mozart, because as a kid, as a musician, I was always told that Mozart had this natural talent. He was like 6 and he couldn't even see I remember one of the stories that I was told that he couldn't even see the keyboard. And he'd reach up with his hands and he would play the bit his sister was, because he would hear the notes and just knew how to play them. And then he wrote his first songs at like 6 and his first symphony at 12 or something. Don't quote me on the dates, but all this sort of stuff. And Gladwell in his book actually rips Mozart apart and says, no, that's probably not true. And actually it's not true. He said his first songs were pretty awful. His father probably tweaked some of them to sell them up. But what Mozart had was opportunity and a support structure that allowed him to put in the work to get to that 10,000 hour mark, because Mozart's greatest works were actually written in his 20s. And yet we love these stories where we talk about, I came from nothing and then I rose up and out of nothing, I became something great. Gladwell systematically takes that myth and tears it apart in his book, because it's not like that. There's no such thing as just of being a natural genius. Everybody who's a genius works really hard, or not. And I'm using the wrong word here. It's not. There is a thing as natural genius, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee your success. That being successful requires becoming an expert in your field, and also requires that hard work and dedication. He states like this. He says, the lesson here is very simple, but it is striking how often it is overlooked. We are caught in the myth of the best and the brightest and the self-made that we think outliers naturally spring from the earth. We look at the young Bill Gates and marvel that our own world allowed that 13-year-old to become fabulously successful entrepreneur, but that's the wrong lesson. Our world only allowed one 13-year-old unlimited access to a time-sharing terminal in 1968. If a million teenagers had been given that same opportunity, how many more Microsofts would we have today? In other words, hard work, opportunity, practice, and a moderate amount of intelligence is what's needed to allow people to hit their potential. If any one of those items is missing from the equation, then someone who might have had the natural tools for success could potentially lose their ability to achieve that success. In fact, Gladwell goes on to state that success is not a random act. It arises out of predictable and powerful set of circumstances and opportunities. This weekend we were able to go down to my daughter's baby shower, and it was done at this really nice botanical garden and farm down in Orange County called Rancho Los Lomos. While I was there, I got to meet a man by the name of Brett Lawrence, who is a friend of my son-in-law, Zach's. They're business partners, I believe, and Brett's family owns that ranch, and they have turned it into this wedding venue. It's a gorgeous place. It's nestled. It's nestled in the rolling hills of Orange County. It's green. There's trees everywhere. I mean, it's just a spectacular. I couldn't think of too many places that would be more beautiful than this place to get married. Maybe some places equally as beautiful, but nothing more. It's a gorgeous piece of property. And anyway, my son-in-law had said, "Hey, you want to try one of these seltzers?" And they're young. They're all into that White Claw stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, man. That's not my thing. And he's like, no, trust me. You'll like this. It's Brett's Seltzer Company. And I'm like, all right, fine. I'll try it. And so we went and had this seltzer, and it was really good. It turned out it didn't have that weird aftertaste that a lot of other seltzers have, and it was made with all natural ingredients, and it was delicious. And so I got to talking to Brett. I said, well, how is it that you came into a seltzer business? I mean, you run in this wedding venue. He goes, well, it's actually not that big of a stretch. He goes, I'm in the wedding business, and he goes, I was sick of when people came out here to do weddings, and we were doing their receptions, that I was selling other people's beer. So I started a craft beer business. And then I realized that wasn't going to be, that seltzer was the next, kind of big thing, or the new wave of craze and alcohol drinking. And so I sold the craft beer business, and I opened up Elephant Hard Seltzer. And, so it was another place where somebody was able to see the opportunity and seize upon it at the right time. And timing also becomes super important when it's about seizing opportunities. And that's why, when we talking about these new things that are coming out, and there's a lot of there's always skepticism. I remember listening back in the day that every new invention has to go through these different stages. And I think the first one was that'll never work. And then somebody does it and then go, okay, fine, it works, but it'll never catch on. And then it's okay, fine, it works and it caught on, but it's immoral, it's bad. And then after that, it's okay, fine. Then the next bit is oh, well, it's always been around and nobody cares anymore. And I think in that talk, they were talking about the telephone. And it was oh, no, what? You can't invent a telephone. You can talk from one side of the world to the other. Just come on. What are you going to do? You're going to run wires across the country? That'll never work. What, are we going to put a phone in everybody's house? Well, nobody's going to want that. Then people won't talk to each other in person. Or it'll be, oh my gosh, it's a horrible thing, because now you can lie because we're not looking at each other. And so anyway, it goes through this whole wave of this thing, and then eventually the thing gets invented. It is practice. So we are able to do it. It is able to be stretched across the country. We are able to get past it. It's not immoral or unethical. And yeah, people enjoy it, and then they use it, and it becomes so blasé that people can't imagine their lives without it. And it's based on those things. And it kind of goes back to that Matthew principle that where it says in Matthew chapter 13, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Anyway, after meeting Joe the other night at the baseball game and Brett this weekend and having those conversations, it's kind of been this idea that we need to not be afraid to seize opportunities as they come for us. And after meeting Joe the other night, I'd Googled him and I wanted to see if the stories he was telling me were all true. And of course, they were all true. And during that conversation, I thought about asking him to come onto my podcast as a guest. And then I was like, this guy's busy. He's important. I'm a nobody. And so I wussed out. I didn't do it. And I missed an opportunity because I was afraid to ask for something. What's the worst that would happen? He would have said no. And I'd still be telling the same story. But the best that could have happened is he would have said yes. And then we would have been able to have him tell his whole story. And the thing is in life, we need to not be afraid of failure or getting rejected. We should just do the thing so we don't miss the opportunity. We often miss opportunities because we're afraid to ask for things, and we're often afraid to ask for the things we want, but settle for the things we can get. And that's not necessarily the best way of doing business. I know when I was in junior high school, we had endeavored to raise some money to restore the Statue of Liberty. It was going through renovations at the time. It was back in the 1980s. And I don't remember how much money we raised, but we raised a lot, enough to where we had a big to-do, and there was a speaker that came out. And I don't remember exactly what this guy told us in his whole speech, but he said this one point, and I've never forgot it. He said, it's always better to aim for the stars and miss than aim for a pile of shit and get it. And just like Joe said in Forbes magazine, in an article that was written about him, he goes, so many people are afraid to fail, but who cares? You roll that lesson into the next thing, and you can either get your ass kicked or grab a board and paddle with it. By the way, when Joe got laid off and he started Nest betting, he was 45 years old. And now, today, 13 years later, that company's worth $30 million. I think it's time we grab the board and start paddling. Hey, thanks for tuning in this week. We'll catch you next week. Have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.
The Weekly Bark.